Okay, so I need to give a little credit to a gentleman named Egon von Greyerz. Or is that Greyerz? Egon von Greyerz. Founder of Matterhorn, has a site, goldswitzerland.com, posts some articles from time to time. And here's the kind of, what they're about, what this guy and his company and his website's about. The art of wealth preservation. Physical gold is nature's currency and timeless insurance. Our global client base strategically store an important part of their wealth in Switzerland in physical gold and silver outside the banking system. Key word. Makes my ears perk up. Oh, outside the banking system. We are pleased to deliver a unique and exceptional service to our highly esteemed wealth preservation clientele. I've seen him around every great once in a while. He makes a lot of good points. The guy's been around a lot longer than I have, okay? And understands the importance of having some kind of wealth preservation. So he has this article. It was posted in earlier this year, or actually the 6th of January, 2017, on his site. He calls it Black Magic Fraud to be Exposed in 2017, Gold Up 300 Times. I'm like, 300 times? Whoa. From when? And I think he's talking about from 1973 when it was, or 71 or whatever, when it was like $35. But we will see. I read most of this and said, okay, I didn't know what to expect from the title, but I think this makes a lot of sense to a lot of you guys. It will. He says, at the beginning of a new year, it would be totally natural to forecast what the likely events and trends will be for 2017. A lot of experts around the world will predict a number of new events, as if a lot of things will change just because we're entering a new year. But sadly, I will disappoint everyone and not change direction in any single area that I have been talking about for many years. Trends don't change because we're in a new year. And I'll add one. Trends don't change just because an awesome president takes over. The principal long-term trends take a long time to develop and even longer to reach a turning point. So he says the alchemy or black magic started in 1913. I think you know what he means by that, Federal Reserve. What started with the creation of the Fed in December 1913 led to the biggest experiment in alchemy that the world has ever experienced. Alchemy is the process of turning base metals to gold. But alchemy also means a seemingly magical process of transformation and creation. Alchemy derives from Greek with a bit of Arabic and simply means black magic, which he says it's called AI or AI. And black magic or alchemy is exactly what the bankers who met on Jekyll Island practiced in order to set up the Federal Reserve Bank. This would be the central bank of the U.S. that would be owned by private bankers and for the benefit of these bankers. This extremely clever and devious conspiracy followed the words of Mayor Amschel Rothschild, who 100 years earlier said, quote, and I love this quote, "Give me control of the nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." So from the beginning of 1914, the alchemy experiment started turning paper into money. The money printing and credit creation bonanza, which has lasted for almost 100 years, almost came to an abrupt end, which actually it's lasted 100 years. 2017 now, right? Almost came to an abrupt end during the 2006 to 2009 great financial crisis. The financial system was staring into the abyss in 2007, but the bankers were not going to give up easily their very successful 100-year experiment in alchemy. The virtually bankrupt investment bank, such as J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs, told the Fed, and thus all central bankers, what they needed to do to save the system, and another massive dose of black magic was created to the extent of around $25 trillion. This made it possible for the bankers to hold on to their global financial empire and maintain control of the money. the world is now running on empty. Since the crisis started in 2006, global debt has gone up by 70%. The problem is, in most Western countries, many dollars of additional debt is required to produce $1 of additional GDP, as in gross domestic product. The world is running on empty, and it seems that we are reaching the point of recognition. This is the point when the world is starting to realize that the black magic financial system is actually a massive fraud that the bankers have gotten away with for a very long time. But it is not just the bankers that are at fault. Through their financial power, they have bought governments, industry, and media. The power of money, albeit totally fake, has given total control of the whole Western system. Sadly, all good things must come to an end, especially if they are based on fraudulent principles, because alchemy doesn't work, since it is not possible to create wealth for a whole country or the world by just printing pieces of paper. It does work for the people who are closest to the printing press, since they can use the money before it loses all its value. The sad thing is that the people also think that they are better off in this system. For the ones who have achieved a better standard of living, they don't realize that this is not due to a real improvement in productivity, but mainly to global debt going from virtually zero 100 years ago to $230 trillion today. And by the way, I think it's a lot higher than that. Within this astronomical figure is personal debt that cannot be repaid and government debt that will not be repaid. In addition, there are unfunded liabilities and derivatives in the quadrillions of dollars. A major secular downturn is next. We now have 10 years since the crisis started, and judging by the optimism in financial markets, and especially stocks, it seemed... and by the way, I forgot. Should have said this in my first video today. Dow Jones, over 20,000. First time in history, it hit the 20,000 mark. We have now reached 10 years since the crisis started, and judging by the optimism in financial markets, and especially stocks, it seems that the recent financial crisis was just an irritation. What few people realize is that the 2006 to 2009 was just a rehearsal, and the real crisis is likely to start very soon. I have many times outlined the various risks with sovereign debt, the banking system, and all bubble asset markets such as stock, bonds, and property. Add to that the serious global geopolitical risks, as well as the risks of civil unrest and cyber wars, and we have a concoction which is likely to inflict serious damage to the world starting as early as 2017 and lasting at least 5 to 8 years, but maybe longer, a lot longer. During a working life that is approaching half a century, you gain a lot of experience. You see the eternal optimism of mankind, but you also experience pessimism that is of an even greater magnitude than the optimism. I recall starting to work for a retail company called Dixon's Group PLC in 1972 and receiving my first options at 136 pence, he says. By the end of 1974, after a severe stock market crash, Dixon's shares were down 93%. The company was solid financially and profitable, but the pessimism was extreme. There were national strikes. There was electricity for only 3 days per week, and most people thought that this dire situation would last forever. Obviously, the situation turned around, and we built Dixon's to a FTSE 100 company and the leading UK electronic retailer. Since 1972, I have experienced 4 major corrections, market corrections of above 40%. After the first one, which ended in 1974 at Dow Jones 570, the U.S. market has risen to a top of 19,987 just a few days ago. Again, he said this in the 6th of January. It's now 20,000. After every fall, the powers that be have applied their black magic. This includes interventions by the plunge protection team, interest manipulations, money printing, and many more tricks to get the market up. But for any stock market investor, This has been the most wonderful ride up into the sky. The market, which has gone up a massive 35 times, or, percent-wise, over a 42-year period. This is a compound annual growth rate of almost 9%. That means that on average, a stock market investor has doubled his money every 8 years. A $25,000 investment in 1974 would be worth $875,000 today. So he says gold has been up 30 times since 1971, likely to be up 300 times at least, he says. Now, this is interesting. Not surprising. So stocks and bonds have been a terrific investment. But what about the barbarous relic called gold? This is the investment that most people don't understand and that banks and investment advisors avoid at any cost. Well, this most hated investment has gone up 30 times in value between 1971 and today. And remember, as opposed to the stock market, gold is far from the high, which was $1,920 in 2011. At that point, gold had been multiplied 55 times. Since 1999, the Dow is down 62% against gold. Very few investors and no investment advisors know this, nor do they realize that stock markets are in a long-term secular downtrend against gold. This trend will not stop until stocks fall by another 90% against gold in the next few years. That will take the Dow/gold ratio down to 1-to-1 where it was in 1980. But more importantly, before the next gold bull market is over, gold will be up over 300 times since 1971 in today's money. That will give a gold price of $10,000 plus and a lot more in hyperinflationary money. Government's black magic economic data. The black magic, or alchemy, doesn't stop with printing money or manipulating markets and interest rates. No, as government deficits grow and real unemployment rises to levels last seen in the Great Depression, all economic figures must also be massaged or altered to paint a rosy and false picture of the economy. What did we get with Barack Obama? A nice rosy picture of the economy when you and I could see past that. And by me reading this video to you today, this article to you today through my video, if you didn't know these things, I think you're learning right now. As government deficits grow and the real unemployment rises to levels last seen in the Great Depression, all economic figures must also be massaged or altered to paint a rosy picture and false picture of the economy. What is interesting is that this blatant manipulation of economic figures is totally accepted by economic analysts, media, and Nobel Peace Prize winners. Or not necessarily Peace Prize, but just Nobel Prize winners. There is no serious analyst of any economic data today. Whatever the government propaganda machine puts out is totally accepted as fact. That real unemployment is 22% and not 5%, or that real wages have been declining for decades, or that real inflation is considerably higher considerably higher, or that real GDP, adjusted for real inflation, is going down and not up. This is ignored by everybody. The black magic adjustments made by governments to all these figures are totally swallowed by everyone hook, line, and sinker. The implosion of bubbles to start in 2017. So what will happen in 2017? Will Trump make any difference? Of course, Trump can't change anything. As I said initially, the course was set 100 years ago and cannot be changed by any president or individual. Presidents or leaders are instruments of their time. The right leader to best carry out what the economic cycle dictates will always be elected, whether it is a Carter, Reagan, or a Trump. Today, the world is ready for a turn in all bubble markets, a collapse of credit markets, a surge in interest rates, an increase in deficit spending, and a failure of the financial system. It is likely that Trump will be the instrument or catalyst to make all of this happen. His proposed infrastructure spending, tax cuts and trade tariffs are a very good start to trigger all these risks and make them happen in the next few years. No one must rely only on cash or money in the bank. Very few investors are prepared for the turn that is likely to start in 2017. Notice he's saying likely. Maybe it's 2018. Who knows? Also, no one is prepared for what governments worldwide are doing to control people's money. In country after country, to hold or transact in cash is virtually a crime. The reasons for this are manifold. It makes it much easier to control the people and their spending, and it makes all tax avoidance almost impossible. But the principal reason is to try to prevent a collapse of the financial system. If there is no cash, bank runs are impossible. There will be no ATM machines with money, and any electronic transfer can easily be stopped. So far, gold or silver are not controlled in any Western country. In other words, to that extent. The Indian government is now threatening to confiscate gold. For a country where private gold ownership of gold is more widespread than anywhere in the world, the confiscation of their gold would lead to a revolution and a war against the government. It is possible that a next step in some countries would be to make physical gold reportable. An additional step in some countries could be confiscation. I doubt this will happen in the West, but the risk is there. It would be much easier to tax the assets of the rich, but the possibility of this happening makes it even more critical to hold physical gold for wealth preservation purposes outside your country of residence and outside the banking system in a safe jurisdiction with strong gold traditions. Switzerland, which produces more than 60% of the gold bars in the world and which has a tradition of saving in gold, is very unlikely to ever confiscate gold. Also, Switzerland is one of the oldest democracies in the world and a country where rule of law applies. The world is now entering a very uncertain period with a high risk of political, economic, and financial upheaval. Taking measures against these risks is now critical, including not being heavily exposed to the banking system and owning some physical gold and silver for wealth protection and insurance purposes. So, as you might have guessed, his company, they do that. They have a private vault, allocated accounts for you. You know, the real deal, not the fake allocated accounts that they're going to dip into. And that's what he's getting at. Personally, again, I prefer to hold my own stash in my control. I don't want to send it outside the country. I just would not feel comfortable. But of all people to trust, this would be one company for sure. Should anyone ever think about that. So, very interesting points of view here, I must say, which is why it was totally video worthy of me today. Interesting stuff on the whole September 23rd, 2017 thing. I've been studying a little bit about this lately, as I told you I would do. And all the movies and stuff showing that date. And I told you then, look, there's never a year. They always just put like 9/23, like the 9/11 stuff was in all these movies before 9/11, but it never said 9/11/2001. Same thing with September 23rd. And I think I found a couple of links maybe it's just one, you may want to check out. I'm not going to do it here. It requires another video. Have to. Totally different. It needs its own title for sure. So I'm actually going to do one more video. 4 videos today. I apologize. But information is valuable. Okay? And this may be very valuable. Take care.